New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is pleased to present The Inclusive Church, Ideas and Resources for Leaders of Multicultural Ministries. The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Tuesdays at 12 noon Mountain Time. Join Tracy and her guests as they go deep and share practical tips and resources you can use in your ministry. And now let's explore the Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown. I am so delighted that you are here with me on the Inclusive Church. Let's dive in. But first, let me give you a few reminders. So when we say Inclusive Church on this show, in this program, or when you hear me talking about it just about anywhere, I am not talking about a building. I'm not talking about a Sunday service. I'm talking about the people. If we didn't learn anything else during the pandemic and over the last few years, we learned that church is not a building, it is the people. Or let's say we relearned that. And so when I say church and when we're talking about ideas and resources for multicultural ministries, we're talking about how do we create communities of people, programs and events, not just Sunday services, but also Sunday services that are representative of so many different kinds of people. And so church is not a building or a specific time of the week. It is the church, the congregation, the people who are coming together to grow spiritually, to support each other spiritually, to learn and practice spiritual principles. So that's number one. And then the other thing is that I always try to remember to say that when I say leaders of ministries, I am not only talking about the minister, right? I'm talking about everyone who steps in as a leader to make the church or the congregation or the event work. So that could be a team leader, it could be, and often means we're talking about volunteers who raise their hands to serve on the board of the organization or as someone who plans an event. And it's people in all different kinds of roles. So with that handle, then let me just remind you that our focus on Inclusive Church is to really share ideas and resources. And today I have as my featured guest someone who I have so much respect and admiration for. Her name is Reverend Abigail Schairer. And I'll tell you 3 random things that I know about Abigail, and then I'll bring her on and she can add anything else that she feels it's really important for you to know in the context of our conversation today. So, random thing number 1 that I know about Abigail. Yes, Abigail serves as the Associate Minister at CSL, Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, currently, and has been there for a few years after founding a couple of other ministries. Number 2, random idea, random fact, not idea, fact about Reverend Abigail Schairer. One of the previous ministries that she founded is called Sister Spirit. And I am going to ask her to talk a little bit about Sister Spirit, because I know you're curious just by the name of it. What does that do? What does that group do? And then the third thing that I know, and it is a fact about Abigail that she doesn't know, is that I have never, ever seriously considered dyeing my hair. But Abigail Schairer is the one person who almost every time I see her, I go, maybe, just maybe, I could dye my hair like that. So that is a fact. Abigail Schairer is like the most inspiring hair dyeing wearing person I know. And I am loving this blue and purple. Welcome. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
Inclusive Church.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be asked.
So I picked 2 random and pretty high level facts about Abigail. What, if anything else, do you want people to know about who you are?
Well, I do my hair myself, just so you know. I've been dyeing my hair since I was 18. And fortunately, my hairstylist, when I lived in California, she actually coached and mentored me on how to do really cool dye jobs. So she'd cut my hair and I'd dye my hair, and I still dye my hair, and I love it. So as part of my own personal creative expression, it is my palette on which I get to work on. And I love doing it. And it takes me 4 hours. So that's a random fact about my hair and about me. And also this year I dyed it galaxy themed because of Sister Spirit, which I just got back from recently. And we had a cosmic, out of this world theme. So I wanted to be in alignment with our cosmic theme that we had going on.
I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. So since you just got back from Sister Spirit, just briefly tell people what Sister Spirit is and what you just got back from, and then we're going to dive into some other stuff.
Well, it's hard to describe, but I will say that 17 years ago, I was going to a retreat called Woman Spirit, and I loved it very much. And I had this little vision board that had this little picture of a woman by a lake saying, "Arrive as friends, leave as family." And I had this impression from, I'll say, the voice of God saying, "Why don't you start a women's retreat where you're at?" And I thought that was a crazy idea because I'd never done anything like that before. And it really manifested where I got 18 people to come together. And then we decided we're going to dream up our favorite retreat ever and create it. And so that is my dream team that I've had. And we dream up our favorite retreat we'd ever want to go to. and then we have it. So it's usually very spiritual. We want to have really deep, profound experiences, but then we also want to have a lot of fun, laugh a lot, just really enjoy the richness of life that we've come here to partake in. So sisterspiritretreat.org is if you want to find out more about it. It's beyond. It's not me that created it. It's an infinite idea that is bigger than me. And every year the idea outdoes itself. And I am delighted to participate in such a great creative endeavor with so many women that transforms all of us. So, yeah.
I love that. And even though I have never attended a Sister Spirit retreat, I have heard like so many raving reviews, raving women, rave reviews about what you just said, that the going deep spiritually in different ways. So it's not the same every year. And also just having so much fun, where I'm surprised how many people think that spirituality is just solemn and quiet and not raucous, rowdy fun. Like, why would you think that's not spirituality too, right?
Right? Yeah. Yeah, we were created to laugh and to, for me, I feel like to enjoy life. And there are challenges and difficulties for sure. And there's such beauty and richness and joy in life that I think it's worth partaking in for sure.
And another piece just related to this idea of inclusive church and church not having to be a building. Like there's so much diversity, even when you have folks who are in the same group. So it's Sister Spirit, right? So it's a women's retreat, but there's so much diversity even within that group. And I think I do want to just talk about that for maybe 5 minutes or so, because a lot of times when we say we want to be inclusive, we are thinking, everybody has to be from different primary groups. Well, you could have 100 women and you're still going to have so much diversity. So to be inclusive when you're planning a retreat like that, where you said you have a dream team and, so the ideas come from not just through you, but do you all ever think about the diversity there and how you'll be inclusive of different kinds of women, different types of women?
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say that there's been several different interesting, I'll say, heart-expanding discussions over the years on various topics that we have had. For instance, one year we celebrated different goddesses from different cultures. And so just being very intentional on recognizing all that not just picking a specific goddess like Athena, or we would have like Kuan Yin, and we would have, now I'm having a blank on all the goddesses. That was a few years ago. But, so that there would be a variety of different cultures represented whenever we're celebrating the different goddesses that we're looking at, that have different features that we can know that they are archetypes for all of us, regardless of what our culture is, that there's archetypes that exist in that goddess expression that also exist in women as a whole. So that's one that's been interesting. That another one is just the idea that we're a women's retreat, and recognizing and knowing that some people who are born female may be gender fluid or gender inclusive, and how do we, or those who were born male but now identify as female. And so we want to invite the people who were born male and identify as female to our retreat. And we also want the people that are gender fluid and gender inclusive to come to our retreat, which is called Sister Spirit, a retreat for women. So just our languaging around, and that's been the last couple of years of like, how do we make this so that is as identified as part of who we are, that you can identify as gender fluid, gender inclusive, non-binary, and be welcome at our retreat, just knowing that we're focusing on sometimes the divine feminine, or sometimes, women's issues that come up, and also us wanting to have a consciousness around that, knowing that a variety of people will be coming to the retreat. And so, we buy pronoun buttons optional pronoun buttons that people can wear. And as leaders, I've invited my team, when they share, that they speak their pronouns, so people know how they would like to be addressed. And those are all conversations that we've had over the years of how are we more inclusive? Plenty of men get upset at me because I have a women's retreat. And I do other retreats that are, but this particular retreat is a women's retreat. And so it is what it is. And, there is a safety and a security that come in those conversations that happen between women as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me that here we are in the 21st century, and there is still discomfort or distrust. And distrust is the one that I think really surprises me, that, if you're not being inclusive, if you have a group of people do something just with that group. Like if you have ministers do something and it's just ministers, why are you leaving out laity and practitioners, right? If you have an African-American circle in your community, well, why are the Black people getting together? Like, you're not being inclusive. That's discriminatory. And and so we could do that with every category that we could think of. And it does still surprise me, because I would like to have believed that we had grown to that place where we understand it's not either or, that it's a both and, that we are valuing the times where we are engaging together. And we also understand the value that comes from people who share some common identity, to share time and explore, especially knowing that even though they share one common identity, which is what we were just talking about, that, right, they may share one common identity, in all the other identities, there's going to be a lot of variety to navigate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. And I love the examples that you shared also, because still, when people are saying inclusion, a lot of times they are thinking only about race. So, it's like, oh, well, you appear to be a white woman, and so is Sister Spirit only for white women? And do you have, Black women? And do you have, women from different racial and ethnic groups? And it's like, yes, that's a valid question to ask. And it's not the only way we should look at being inclusive.
Yeah. I remember one year, probably like the fourth year that we did it. And this woman was like, oh, I'm not coming to that retreat. I'm like, oh, well, why not? Well, it's a retreat for lesbians. And I'm like, just because I am gay doesn't mean everybody here is gay. It's just like, it was a very interesting assumption that was made. It's like, well, we are inclusive of people, and that's great. But not just that. It's like, well, we had intergenerational conversations one year where we had those in their 20s and grouped with, together, and those in their 30s and those in their 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, and then they asked each other questions about that their experience, what is their experience from their perspective. And it was really, really fruitful, I'll say.
I love that. I love that idea of having people from different generations. One, yes, here's what we have in common, but what do we want to know about this other group? And then to be able to ask and hear the responses, you get to hear, where are we similar, but also where are we really different?
Yeah.
And that's something that, okay, you've done it as Sister Spirit, but I hope that people watching are hearing that as ooh, we could do that with our community, right? Because that's the whole idea for the show. What are some ideas and resources? And especially with guests, what have you done? Because that then is giving ideas and options to others. So what does it mean to you to be inclusive in spiritual communities? I'm just, people know that we don't do scripts on this show or any show that Tracy hosts. And so, yeah, I'm just curious, when you think of inclusion in spiritual communities, how would you define it, or what comes to mind?
I mean, I think for me, inclusion is something that is really important to me, because it means that I have an investment in creating a sense of belonging wherever I'm at. And it's multifaceted. It's very intersectional. And I need to, as a leader, think about all of those areas that where that's important. So for instance, looking at diversity of ages, looking at diversity of ethnicities, looking at diversity of, LGBT folks, looking at diversity of backgrounds and cultures and religious upbringings, looking at all those different diversities of abilities. And, I think we're learning a lot about, neuroplasticity and neurodivergence and how that affects people and how they think. And I think about those things even in I'm learning to continue to think about those things in classes I'm teaching. Like, historically, I've noticed that a lot of classes I've taught to have geared at certain types of students who learn a particular way. And so how can I, as a leader, expand my own awareness of different learning styles so that I can tap into all of those students that want to learn? And maybe their brain doesn't work the same way mine does. So how, as a teacher, can I grow to think about that when I'm creating curriculum, for instance? So there's a lot of different aspects that I think about when I'm thinking about an inclusive church. And even in leadership, who are the leaders? Are we thinking about those things when we're pulling together volunteers? All of that is important, and is a constant, I want to say, is constantly on my heart, and also that I'm constantly growing into a greater awareness of, because I have a lot to learn about others who are different than me. And those are the people that are going to teach me the most. So I really want to do my best to think about all of that whenever I'm creating something.
You just said something. Well, I thought I was going to respond or talk about two other things you said. That last thing you said is like, oh no, I have to go there. It's like we're always, when we're doing this work, it's constant, right? It's lifelong learning, because as long as we're alive, we are going to engage with people we don't know, ideally.
Yeah.
And so some of the work that we have to do as leaders who intend it to be inclusive, some of the work we have to do is really our own work of, I'm never going to arrive at the end. I am always learning more. I am always watching for more. I'm always listening so I can be better. I can have better skills at noticing the opportunity to be inclusive and the skill of then adapting my behavior or the curriculum or the program or event or the examples I'm using, right? All of the things that we think about. Am I able to adapt faster? I want to say in the moment when that's required, but sometimes it's not in the moment. It's just I'm I'm preparing for a talk in 2 weeks. So what examples could I include that I haven't included before based on what I know about this group?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Last week, in the month of April, there was a meeting I was in, and people who were in the meeting were asked, what do you look for that lets you know the community you are a part of, the church you are a part of, the community you're a part of is committed to inclusion? And as I listened to people, several things jumped out, like there are people in leadership that represent different groups. So some of the things you said, it's like I'm realizing those are some of the things that I heard from this group of participants in this meeting. But, there's visible diversity in leadership or on the platform, that topics that are sensitive in the real world outside of our spiritual community are brought up, like there's relevance. There's relevance. Someone else gave an example of, I see people who are different from me and everybody else seems comfortable with them. So it taught me I needed to get comfortable with the diversity, because, everybody around was thinking it was really cool. So I think that's a testament as well, like to have people from your own spiritual community speak back the goals that you set as a leader, whether they knew that or not. But when they say, oh, here's how we know we're inclusive, and you're like, I can imagine you getting feedback on the feedback form from a class you teach at CSL Seattle, or from, a retreat from Sister Spirit, and then looking at it and go, oh, that's really good. Because 8 years ago, that was one of the goals we set. And this was their first time taking a class with me, but it came through, right?
Yeah. Well, and I have to say, surveys are so great. Like people telling their actual opinions and ideas have been so helpful for me as a teacher. I have improved so much because I actually look at those and look at the ideas or suggestion for improvement, not as, my failure, but more as another way that I can be inclusive. And so I'm learning, well, what works for the student? What's working for them? I mean, I really want to teach in a way that works for the student, not just in a way that works for me. And it's easy to get in that little comfort zone of, well, this is how I do things, and so tough bananas for you. It's like, but really, if I'm growing as a teacher and I'm learning about how I can present things in a way that the student gets it, like that's the whole point.
Exactly. That you would think that all you would, I would, not you, I would like to believe that everyone who's teaching a class, that's their goal, right? That the students get what they need in the way they need it. But I know that wasn't the case when I was taking classes on a regular basis. More often than not, I recognized in the first, hour that, oh, I'm going to have to figure out how I get in alignment with this teacher's style or preference if I'm going to understand what they're teaching and get an A from this class.
Oh yeah.
And it takes a lot of work because you're trying, as the student, you're trying to learn the new information, but at the same time, you're doing a whole psychology and right, you're adapting and you're not in your natural learning style.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. And for me growing up, I feel like I am good at playing the game. And like I'm good at figuring out what do the people need in order for me to get the A, and then I'll do those things to get the A. But not everybody is wired like that, and that's really not a great way to decide whether or not somebody's successful.
right.
Is if they can figure out what those rules are and they can jump through the hoops. Like that's not really the most effective way if you want to get the biggest impact to be a teacher. So, and in other areas, a preacher, a practitioner, whatever area, if you have a platform and you want to make a positive impact in the world, it's really important to think about, how can we make this multimodal and most accessible to the most amount of people.
And what strikes me is to me that just makes sense. And it makes sense because I am so passionate about being intentionally inclusive. So for me, yes, it's learning, it's, learning theory, or it's understanding how adults learn and all of that. But I realized that my passion about it comes from this desire to be inclusive, or this expectation that we can be inclusive, and whoever has the leadership role or the power position or the authority, or that's where the number one responsibility lies, right? Because you're the one making the decisions, or you're the one designing the course, or you're the one. How do you develop the skill to be able to really adapt the way you deliver, or the way that you problem solve, or for my corporate clients, the way that you set policy, or the way that you do anything as a leader? Are you taking into consideration that everyone is not like you? In fact, no one else is just like you.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we believe everyone is an individual expression of the divine, the creator, the source of all life, then, technically there is no one who is exactly like you. So.
Yeah. You know what? You reminded me on something that you kind of mentioned at the beginning, and I want to bring that forward right here, because it's not just the leaders who are at the top. They do make an impact, and if you're a leader and you're at the top, you do influence your organization, and it's every single level of leader. And especially when you're looking at church communities, the volunteer, you're a leader if you're volunteering. And so you can bring this to your volunteer job that you're thinking about. I try and remind people that different people have different communication response styles. So for instance, there's some people who like they're in their email all day long. And then other people like are on their phone all day long. And other people are texting all day long. And so you send out a email to your volunteer team and half the people aren't going to get it. And so just recognizing that there's different receiving methods of like, if you didn't hear from that person, maybe you should call them and then maybe you should text them as well, because what are their styles of receiving communication? And it's going to be different for everybody. Just something simple like that makes an impact.
Oh, it makes a huge impact. And I'm laughing because yesterday I got this text message from someone who I care about a lot and who I interact with on a fairly regular basis. And this text message was so long. It had so much information in it. And I was like, why didn't she put this in an email? Text messages are for if you have a question and I can answer yes, no, or in one sentence, great. But right, so I caught myself being like, all of these reasons it shouldn't be in a text message, and I was irritated, which is what made me notice it, because I felt irritated. And then literally what you just said, literally I said, Tracy, this is nothing new. 9.9, like 99.9% of the time from this person, she clearly, text message is her style of communication. Her phone is with her. She sends the text out, boom. And I would say that 75% of my communication is email. If it's data, if it's things I want you to remember and go back to, I'm going to put it in an email, because I know if I get it in a text message, I'm not going to know where it is. I'm not, maybe I will remember. Right? It's like, oh, this is the person. Oh, she's the one that gave me the information. Oh, it's going to be in a text message. Let me scroll back. But I tend to delete, text messages. I don't have a way to star them. And then, yes, there are some people I know who I know if I want to get them, I need to call them. So that is inclusion. I'm glad you brought it up, because again, people tend to think, oh, inclusion, you're just talking about race, or maybe you're talking about sexual orientation. Maybe you're talking about, maybe, just maybe, you might be talking about disabilities. But in general, and I'm glad that they think race and ethnicity. I'm glad for that. It is important. But when we're talking about inclusion, it's that and more.
It reminds me of, so I had the opportunity to co-found the Next Gen Retreat, which I've passed on to the actual next generation. And this is a retreat for 18 to 35-ish year olds in Centers for Spiritual Living. But everybody's welcome from New Thought, by the way. But whenever I was working with my leadership team, I'd call and leave the messages, and I later found out that not a single one of them listened to their messages ever. Like I was like, oh, they will not. And I love phone. I'm a phone person. Please talk to me on the phone, please. That's best for me. And I know I'm a rare bird, peacock today, but it's like I had to realize that that generation of my leaders, that is not their method of communication, and they will not receive the message. And so I needed to adapt my own communication strategy so that I could be successful in communicating with them. It was just a big aha and awareness on different generations also respond, and that's kind of a blanket statement. That's
right.
Of course, everybody's individual and different, and it's something I just realized, if I'm dealing with somebody who's younger than me, maybe I should do text message. It might be more successful.
And isn't that the point?
Mhm.
It's what is going to help me be successful or help us be successful in whatever our shared goals are. And I think that's what confuses me about why people are hesitant to value diversity and to commit to being inclusive. It's like, wait a minute, we're in this spiritual community together, and everybody has a shared goal of learning, practicing, and maybe teaching to others our spiritual beliefs, but really learning it and applying it in our lives. We have that in common. So, why is it that we can't see our way of communicating matters? And yeah, of course, I have, some theories about we live in a society that is so me focused, right? And so individual focused that a lot of people have been socialized to be like, well, no, you should cater to me. Well, this is what I want. And so you should adapt to what I want. So we have that in the greater society. So I do kind of understand. I just refuse to believe that leaders don't see it's to their best, to their own benefit to be able to adapt to all the different people around them.
Yeah. Well, and I also think one of the greatest things that I've learned, actually from well, yeah, I would say one of the things that I learned from Reverend Petra actually is about agreements. Reverend Petra Weldis, who many of you know who might be watching this, is about agreements and then forming, storming, norming, and performing. And the thing about agreements is if we can come together as a group of different people and decide on what works best on communication method for all of us and come to an agreement, then we can move forward. And so agreements are just really important because we can have a conversation and then assumptions aren't made, expectations aren't made. We just agree on like, okay, this is our communication method that we're all going to agree on to use. And let's all make an intention to do that method going forward in this project. And so that way everybody can be on the same page. And then the last thing is the forming, storming, norming, performing. And actually there's a new one that says adjourning. I don't remember the guy who did that, but recognizing and knowing that because you're so different, every team will be different, that you're going to go through a process where you're going to form a team together and then you're going to storm because you're different with different expectations. But whenever you storm together, which is like, oh, the gaps are noticed or the miscommunications happen or the expectations that you had that you didn't talk about come up, all of that kind of storming leads to conversations which allow norming and high performing to happen whenever you're working in spiritual communities and in teams, in anywhere, in any team. And that's one of the best tools that I've ever learned because I want to have diverse teams. And diverse teams will often cause a little bit of storming at first. But if we know that about ourselves, then we can make an investment in each other and work through the storming to figure out what that normal is for us so we can work together. And
yeah, and that's like, right, it's basic. It applies to all kinds of teams. And why wouldn't we use that in our spiritual communities to make our churches, our congregations, our teams more effective? And yeah, and we could be about the business of doing what we're there to do.
mm-hmm.
So our time is beginning to wind down. And what's in my head is this question of, what lesson have you learned the hard way? Which is kind of a possible answer of like, when did you try something that didn't work? Or, when did something you were doing for all the right reasons blow up in your face? But it doesn't have to be that. Just, what heartfelt lesson that might be helpful to others about being inclusive as a leader in a spiritual community? And yes, I am just rambling a little bit to give you time to think of one or two.
Well, I will say that, uh, well, I'm just going to say that cultural appropriation is a very big subject and has many perspectives. And there is, so when a couple of years we used the goddess idea, and then we actually had team members dress up as the goddesses. And that didn't fly over very well. And it was interesting because we had a white person represent an African goddess, and we had an African goddess or an African American person represent a white goddess. And the upheaval was definitely over the white person stepping into sharing about the Black African goddess. And it was interesting because on our team, we had conversations about it beforehand. And, you know, the conversation revolved around, you know, there's a lot of white goddesses that are shared, but nobody shares about the African goddesses. And just because I have this ethnicity does not mean I have to be this goddess. So I'd love it if one of you could feature this goddess. And it led into some very uncomfortable conversations when we actually did it. But the good news is we were willing to have those conversations and really talk about it and what the intentions were, and then of course what the impact was on because we had people of different cultures and backgrounds attending, ethnicities, and how it came across too. So I would say that for me, I recognize that as I'm doing my best, I can make mistakes, and often even the most well-intentioned things can have an impact that aren't so positive. And I love myself through that, and I know that I'm ever growing and ever evolving. And I also I would say that my ask of you and my ask of me is to also assume the best of all of those who are even triggered and going through this together. So that's, a little example.
It's a big example and an important one for 3 reasons. One, we always have to remember that intent does not equal impact. And number 2, I find myself reminding people of this all the time, where they'll be like, well, Tracy, tell me the right thing to say, right? Or tell me which term is the best term to use, or tell me, can I, is it going to be okay for us to have a white person like represent an African or Black goddess? And the answer always is, it depends on who's in the room and what is your intent. Yes, but it could still blow up in your face. So I love that you shared that example, because the skill is not in avoiding all conflict or misunderstanding. The skill is, can I stay in the arena, have the conversation, learn from it, and can I lead other people into the conversation? Because there could be 30 people in the room and 10 have one reaction, 10 have another, and 10 come from a different place. Mm-hmm. So for leaders, how do we have those conversations in advance, which you did, like, oh, we're trying to be more inclusive, let's do this. And then on the other end of it, when people don't like what happened, you had led and facilitated a conversation so all sides could be heard.
Yes.
So I'm glad you shared that example, and I think it inspires all of us to remember that, as you said, the thing is to be willing to have the hard conversations.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to end today's show with that because our time is up. But why I'm not surprised, right? Because you and I could sit down and start talking about inclusion and, maybe come up for air next week this time.
Right. Exactly.
So I want to thank you for saying yes to today, and know that, I may be calling you and saying, hey, can we go deep on this one piece for 45 minutes, like later in the year?
I'd love that. Yeah.
Thanks, Abigail.
Thank you, Tracy.
And everybody else, just remember, you can come hang out with us right here on Inclusive Church every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. And if you are available next week, then you can join me in a conversation with the Reverend Dr. Michelle Medrano. We're going to dive in, and so please join us. Or if you've missed past shows, please go to New Thought Media's channel on YouTube and look. It's probably the easiest place for you to be able to search and find past shows quickly. My name is Tracy Brown. I am so delighted to spend this time with you, and I wish that you, during the next week, will take the time to consider, how can I be more inclusive, and how can I be a leader in my community that supports and models inclusion? Bye for now.
New Thought Media Network is pleased to present The Inclusive Church, Ideas and Resources for Leaders of Multicultural Ministries. The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.